So this is probably the most controversial car that I've had on the channel, and that is the ZD Racing EX07, which is a 1/7 scale four-wheel drive electric hypercar, which sounds a little bit like a tagline that Tesla would use on one of their vehicles. Now, the reason why this thing was so controversial is of course because of this hoonigan body, which we presume is not licensed. But on top of that, once I got the box, it also says Fast and the Furious down here, and I know for a fact that this thing is not affiliated with the movies whatsoever. But speaking of movies, looky here, Ace Ventura delivered my box, and if you haven't seen that movie, that joke has landed very flat. I'm really sorry, you should really watch that movie. Anyway, thankfully, there was no damage to the car, and the box remained well enough intact for me to do this. Now before we get stuck into this unboxing, I want to let you guys in on a couple of things. Number one, I paid for this thing myself. I did get it on sale, which was kind of lucky, but I paid for it with my own money. I did not use any discount codes, and there are no affiliate links in the video description. The other thing that you need to know is that these are available in both ready to run and as a roller, which of course you need to install your own electrics. I got the roller. Now when you get one of these out of the box, you're going to find a bag filled with hardware, and there's going to be a heatsink in there and all sorts of things. Once you crack this bag open, you will find a motor mount. There will be the heatsink with the two built-in fans that will actually go on the motor. There's also a Y lead which will be used for your LED lights. You'll find another bag with the pinion and a whole bunch of screws to help you mount your motor mount as well as your servo. Some double-sided tape to help you put everything together. A whole bunch of zip ties as well, which will help you tidy up your wiring. And in the final bag, you will find the servo mount / receiver box. It'll have the lid in there, and it'll have all the spacers and everything else. There's also a gear cover, which I found to be kind of useless, and there's a tiny little plastic piece as well, which I'll show you where that goes later on. So inside the main bag, you will find a user manual, a couple of spare battery straps which you may or may not need. There's also a sheet in there to help you decorate the car with the stickers, and there's a couple of grill badges. One's a Mustang with the Stallion, the other one's the ZD Racing one. I also found a couple more of these double-sided sticky tape bits and a whole bunch of little screws that I have no idea what they're for. So I'm going to break down this unboxing into a few different sections, and we're going to start right here with the body because there is quite a bit to cover off. Some of it is actually pretty good, some of it's not so great, but hopefully you guys get a better understanding of what this body is all about. In my personal opinion, the body is actually fantastic. They've done a really good job with this, whether it's 100% scale or not, whether it's licensed or not. That to me doesn't mean anything right now. What it does mean is that this actually looks really, really good. Of course, it doesn't come like this. You do need to finish off the body by applying the rest of the stickers and so forth. They do pre-apply the bonnet sticker here. There's one over the hood scoop that's also pre-applied. And of course, you've also got the window stickers that are already on there. And there might be a couple others such as the bumpers and the skirtings and things like that. But all of these, you know, you sort of need to finish off yourself and decorate it however you please. Now, as far as the body itself goes, once you look past the looks of it, you'll start to see that there's probably a couple of things that they could have done a little bit better. First of all, the way that they apply some of these stickers along the bumper and everything, they do look a little bit rough. And also the body cuts and everything aren't sanded back 100%, so there's probably a little bit of trimming that could have been done here, and some things that could have been improved upon hopefully in the future. But overall, it's not too bad. The other thing to note as well is that I did have to put a screw just there and one on the other side as well, because this rear part of the body, as you can see, there's like two pieces here. This is all one piece along here, and then of course you got the main body. They don't come pre-attached, and they don't give you the screws for this either. I mean, they give you a bag filled with tiny little screws, which I thought would have been for something on the body, but it's not the case at all. Body thickness itself is actually pretty good. This is not a flimsy body by any means. It actually has a bit of weight and a bit of thickness to it, which I really like. But what I don't know is if it's 100% Lexan. This could be just PVC, and at the first sign of a crash, it just shatters into a million pieces. I have no idea. But that's the only thing I can't really tell. As you can see by the wiring there, the tail LEDs are already pre-installed, and then at the front there's also front LEDs that are already pre-installed as well. If you see a little bit of oil splatter on here, that is a result of the center diff, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. But things like, you know, the scoops and the vents and all this sort of stuff, these are all like plastic pieces that are actually bolted onto the body itself. So they didn't really cut too many corners here. I actually think they actually did a pretty good job overall. And even the rear spoiler, I mean, have a look at how they've done the detail here. It's actually really, really cool. So good on them. I think they actually did a pretty good job with the body overall. So moving on to the chassis itself, as I said earlier in the video, I got the kit version, which means that you know, it's essentially a roller and you finish it off by installing your own electrics as you please. Now I will talk about the electrics install and why I've chosen these particular components a little bit later on in the video, but for now we're going to start right here with the tires and the wheels, which look really, really good, very scale, and I do believe that these are actually belted. I mean, they feel like they could be belted. There's definitely a bit of give when you push down on the tire, but there's hardly any give when you go sideways, and usually if they're not belted, you know, you'll be able to flex them, and you know, you just can't do that. So I do believe that these are belted. Now, if you want some cheap belted tires, these are probably the ones to get. Again, I'm going to say this purely because I've just happened to stumble across them on AliExpress. You can get a full set of 4 of these for about 55 bucks delivered from AliExpress, at least here in Australia. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but that's a really good deal. And yeah, if you want maybe just to put them on a buggy or something like that, or a different car, and you just want some cheap belted tires, hey, maybe look at these. Again, I don't know if these are any good or not. I'm just saying that if you do need a spare set of these, it's probably worth getting one of those from AliExpress. Now, I have no affiliation with them whatsoever. I'm just putting that out there. Moving on to the suspension itself, I gotta say, I have adjusted the droop screws in this because, you know, with the adjustable body posts that they have and everything, the first thing that I did with this car was adjust the body. And it was a really easy fix to do via the droop screws and everything, but when I drove this at the front of the house, and yes, I have driven it a little bit, when I drove this at the front of the house, the chassis was scraping, this thing was bouncing everywhere. It definitely needs a suspension tune right out of the box. So I've readjusted everything. I had to, I think, raise the body a bit, lower the chassis, or vice versa. And there's a bit of a fine line between making sure that you have enough clearance on the chassis, as well as making sure that the body's not sitting too tight or too close to these tires, because I did rub a little bit on the inside of the body, which I'm spewing about now. But there is a little bit of a mark on the body now due to my sort of oversight of how the suspension was tuned out of the box. So I'm going to play around with some shock oil because it's very bouncy and it really needs to be dampened a little bit nicer. So as much as they have all this bling and aluminium and everything, and they got a cool looking body, when it comes down to it, these are the things that I think, you know, these lesser known companies tend to fall over on, is just the tunability and how these cars come set up out of the box. The body was horrendously not sitting correct, like it looked awful, it wasn't finished right, and then of course now I've got to tune the suspension as well. To some of you this may be a minor thing, but to some other people out there this could be a really big inconvenience, because you know, you're spending the money, why doesn't this thing come set up properly as it should? Adjustable body posts, as I said, you got those front and rear. You got a nice big foam bumper on the front here, which is quite cool. You have sway bars pre-installed front and rear, so they're all in there as well. Of course, this does have 3 diffs in total. There is a disc brake also on here. There's a pad on this side and there's another one on this side just there, which is why you have this servo here. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. These shock towers, these aluminium shock towers, very nicely finished, can I say. I'll show you the front one here as well. So they look like they're really nice CNC machined shock towers. I don't know if they are. They could be just pressed and then they go through a process where they just chamfer the edges to make them look all nice like that. I don't know what the issue or what the process is in these, but you know, they definitely look the business. Whether they're made out of cheese or not, I don't know, but yeah, they look quite good. Of course, we have turnbuckle adjustments here on the rear, and we've got adjustment for your camber on the front here as well, which actually seems to be pretty good there. And you got toe adjustment here as well. So a lot of adjustability with this car. The battery trays, they give you an additional battery strap. There's a gap here for the long battery straps to go long ways. I don't really see the need for that at this stage, so I'm just going to use these for the time being. You can move the rear of the battery tray back all the way another, I think 1 or 2 spots to get, I think it's just one more spot actually when you look at it. So you can see here, you can move that to there, and that will give you a slightly longer battery tray for those of you who perhaps have some really big packs that you want to squeeze in there. Unlike the Armour cars, you cannot flip this motor around. So this is how it's going to be. And yeah, you have to leave it as it is because there's just no way to sort of flip this around. They didn't give you provisions for that to flip that around the other way. So you can't really do that. So if you are going to put some monster motor in here because you want to go ultra fast, just be mindful to measure the distance between here and the motor mount. And I'll actually measure it myself and I'll put it up on the screen for you to see as well, just so you know exactly what the maximum length of motor is that you can fit on here. Of course, you have your center diff through here, pinion gear. I think I'm using a 20 tooth from memory. I can't quite, oh, is it the stock? I think I'm using the stock pinion that they provide with this. I can't recall. I'll put it up on the screen because it has been a little while since I finished building this thing. The rear diffuser that you see here is basically just Lexan kind of bolted together. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's very sharp corners. You will kind of hurt yourself with this if you're not careful, and it is quite flexy and flimsy in there as well. So not as well detailed and as well finished as the Armour cars, but you know, as long as it does the job aerodynamically, that's really all we care about. The chassis, as you can see, I've already got a couple of scrapes here from when I ran it at the front of the house. That is what it looks like. Lots of screws going on there, lots of things being bolted onto it, but it is 4mm thick, so that's a big plus. And you know, this thing's got some heft to it, which is quite nice. And then we move across to the other side, and you can see we've got our receiver box over here. There's your steering servo there, and everything else that you can see along there. You've also got aluminium rear hubs on there and aluminium steering knuckles in the front of this car as well. Everything rides on 17mm hexes. You have really thick drive shafts all the way through, and as you can see here, they've actually split up the rear drive shaft to prevent that oscillating issue that Armour had with the first generation Infractions and Limitless. And that actually rides on as kind of like a, I would say it's almost like a little spool. You know, it's captured on a bearing here. So this is kind of what I was hoping that Armour would do on the second generation, but instead they've kept the drive shaft the same length. They just put a couple of bearings in the middle here to stop the drive shaft from bouncing around. I don't know how much that's helped, but this is definitely a different way of doing that and solving that problem, because there is a long distance here. If you were to make that one piece, no doubt that drive shaft would oscillate like crazy. Now, when I decided to get this car, the first thing that came to mind as far as the electrics go was to put the BLX185 system in here, because I wanted to draw a direct comparison to the Armour Infraction. And what better way to do that, of course, than to put the same power system that came in that car. Now, I know that the current models have all got Spectrum gear and everything in there, but essentially it's the same power system. They just dazzled it up with some Spectrum logos, and now they've got the smart thing where it gives you telemetry voltage and all that, provided you've got a compatible radio to go with it. But I am running an AVC receiver in here, and I've got everything hooked up. So just to kind of show you, give you a bit of a close-up of everything, you've got the BLX185 system here. I've got two 25kg steering servos, so there's one here and of course one for the handbrake back here. I actually got these from Banggood, I think, and they were about 45-50 bucks for both of them, and they both came with aluminium servo horns as well, which you can see on there. So it was a bit of a bargain. You don't need a 25kg steering servo for the brake feature of this. Anything above 5 kilos I think will be sufficient, especially since you're not really trying to lock the brakes. You just wanted to slow the car down. Initially I had this thing cranked all the way, and the first time I applied the brakes, the car just slid it for like I don't know how many meters, and I was like, oh god, I'm gonna get flat spots on my tire, so I don't really want that. So I had to tune and turn the brake strength down on this so that it would actually slow the car down, not necessarily just lock up the wheels and this thing would just skid for like half a mile. So you don't really want to do that. Unless that is what you want to do, that's entirely up to you. But yeah, the brake feature is interesting because it takes a bit of stress out of the motor. You know, you're going to draw less amps, it's going to keep motor temperatures down and all this sort of thing. You may even preserve some battery as well. So there's a lot of benefits with having a brake system like this. And you know, I actually tried to get the brake system to work in tandem with the motor, but I couldn't get it to do it on my DX5C. I tried a few different ways, you know, putting on different auxiliary switches and trying to do different programming. But the DX5C is not as comprehensive as, say, the NX10, which is an aerial radio, and I couldn't really do a lot of that programming. So there's probably more advanced radios out there that will allow you to do something like that, but I just couldn't do it. So I've had to put this on a separate switch, and of course I've got the standard brake, which is, you know, just moving backwards on the trigger and it brakes up. Now, I will say the receiver box in these cars is actually really small. Having to fit a 6-channel receiver in here, because you're going to need, you know, 2 servos, there's fans, there's LED lights, ESC, all this sort of stuff. There's not a lot of room in there for wiring and stuff. In fact, you might see that I've actually got some of the wiring kind of, you know, curled up and zip tied outside because there was just no way of fitting it inside the receiver box. It's quite amazing that you can have a 1/7 scale car and not have enough room in, you know, to make a decent sized receiver box in a car this big. It's really quite astonishing. But if they'd made it just a tiny little bit taller, I think it would have solved a lot of those problems. The electrics install wasn't a hard thing to do overall, but again, I had to clip the ears out of my BLX 185 ESC because originally, you know, these ESCs come mounted or screwed to the chassis of the Armors, and I had to clip it just so that it would actually fit in here. And you know, there's a little plastic piece as well that you probably just see in there. There's a little weird plastic piece. That's to keep the cables away from the spur gear. So really clever thing that ZD Racing did on this car was you know, to keep that there. And then of course all your wiring and everything kind of runs in behind there, and you can zip tie it and, you know, keep it away from all the moving parts. Essentially, that's how it'll work. So I try to do my cable management as best as I can. I'd like to keep everything tidy. And as you can see, it's about as clean as you're going to get it given the circumstances. I can't really do too much more with this. Aside from that, it's all pretty straightforward. So yeah, you know, then you just put your wiring, you can see here for the LEDs, and away you go. You're ready to rock and roll, you're ready to drive this thing. This is a nice looking car. There's no denying that this is a really nice looking car. Is it going to be for everybody out there that wants a big scale street basher? Absolutely not. There is going to be some moral standings that are going to take place. People that are like, no, I'm not going to support this company because it has an unlicensed body, or because it, you know, you can't buy parts from the local hobby shop, or because there's no third-party part support, or whatever the excuse may be. But then there are other people that are like, you know what? I want to try something different. I want to see what someone else is doing, and I want to see how it compares to the more mainstream stuff. I've always been one, at least living here in Australia, where you always sort of go for the underdog, and I wanted to see what the underdog is doing, and this is it. Now, I'm going to say, I'm not necessarily barracking for ZD Racing here, because the experiences that I've had with the previous monster trucks from them, even though those trucks were given to me by Banggood, the experience hasn't been great. You guys have seen the videos, they smash up pretty easy, the parts are pretty brittle, and I don't expect this particular vehicle to be any different in that regard as far as quality goes. However, I'm not going to be sending this off a ramp. This is going to be a street basher. So the only time that you're going to break things is if you mess up your driving and you hit a curb. And of course, any car that's traveling at high speed hitting a curb is going to break. Except this one here, you can't just pop into your local hobby shop and buy the parts. You have to order them online. And that's where the line in the sand is for a lot of people. That's going to be the deal breaker. Where is part support going to come from? Is this car going to be popular enough in a year or 2 years where people are going to start, you know, M2C Racing and bring out a chassis for it and start bringing out upgrades? Is Hot Racing going to start bringing something out? Amped RC, Just Bash It, all of these sort of brands that are supporting Armour and all these other companies, are they going to start supporting this brand as well? I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I highly doubt it, but at the same time, you never know. I mean, this might grow in popularity. The body itself might be a hook to get a lot of people in. But I will warn every single one of you that watches this video, do your research. Where can you get parts from? Are parts going to be available before you dive in? I got this purely because I wanted to see what it was all about. And I wanted to show you, hey, this was not sent to me. I've laid out my own money here and I've come across these problems. You know, the finishing on the stickers isn't great. The way that the body has been cut could be a little bit better. How it came set up out of the box was horrible. I had to readjust the body completely. The suspension isn't great. You guys seen that the center diff was leaking oil. It splattered all over the inside of the body. Now, I don't know if that's going to require a full rebuild after the first run, or if I should pull it apart first and then check it, and I don't know. It looked okay to me, everything was tight. I did check a little bit of it, but I haven't rebuilt the diff. So I've left it as it is. We're gonna see what happens and go from there. Now, as I said, I originally bought this from Banggood. I have seen it since on AliExpress, quite cheap. I think it's under $500 Australian before you add your GST on top. And shipping is bugger all. So if you are in Australia and you want to get one, now's probably a really good time to get a bargain on this, and you're going to get it cheaper than what I paid for it. So just bear that in mind. Banggood at the moment have raised their prices on these things. Shipping has also gotten more expensive. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going to Banggood to buy this. They may have some of the parts there, so that might be your salvation. But if you want to buy the car itself and get some spare tires at a good price, and even the body, they got the body for like 90 bucks, fully painted and everything, with I think 12 cents shipping, which makes no sense whatsoever. So I'll put some links and some stuff in the video description if you guys want to go check it out. It's entirely up to you. I've spent way more money from AliExpress than I probably care to admit. So I've been pretty happy with their service. The only thing is, deliveries can take anything from 2 weeks to 2 months. So if you're in a hurry, maybe look elsewhere. But if you're happy to wait and save yourself a few bucks, check them out. Again, I say this, there are no affiliate links. I have no contacts with anybody in AliExpress. This is just me putting this information out there. You guys do with it what you want. It's entirely up to you. So let's close off this unboxing so we can all go home. So that pretty much wraps up this unboxing of the ZD Racing EX07 Hoonigan car. This is a really nice looking car. I hope the part support becomes a little bit better for this particular brand and this product in the future, because I can see a lot of people really being enticed to get this particular car purely based on its looks. Even if you are not going to straight out bash it like you do some of the other cars that you have, just having this on the shelf or amongst your fleet, it's a bit of a moment in time. It's a piece of history that you don't know how long it's going to be here for, but it's really good that I've actually got my hands on one. So I'm going to leave it here, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to check out the video description down below for links to the car as well as my social media pages. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time. Install and why I've chosen this particular this way, which kind of indicates that there looks as it could be a belt. I'm fumbling. Also, the other thing to note is that I can't breathe now that I got that incense going on. Giving you some feedback in regards to what I do with regards